Welcome to the South Stands, everyone. My name is Zach Moore. I'm calling in from San Francisco. I'm joined by a group of good friends and Buckeye alums. And today we are recapping Ohio State's 42-0 victory over Cincinnati this past Saturday. TG, why don't I start with you? I know you were really concerned about going into this game. You thought this actually might be a tight one. What were your impressions of what you saw on Saturday?
So I've been a big proponent this year that I think that the defense is going to play really well. And that has a lot more to do with the fact that we had athletes. We're going to have a bunch of high draft round picks this year. And that last year wasn't a function of players. It was a function of coaching. Mm-hmm. And so I really wasn't all that surprised to see the defense play as well as they did. To me, that's in line with sort of what I expected. What I was most impressed with, and I think the difference in how the game turned out to how I actually thought it was going to turn out, was how well the offense played.
Right.
Coming off FAU, questions about Dobbins, maybe some questions about the offensive line. I'm still not sure how they all graded out champions against FAU, but that's above my pay grade.
Right.
And, you know, I think that in particular yesterday, Fields really showed how good he can be. Mm-hmm. Some of those throws he made, like I'm in particular thinking about the throw to KJ Hill in the end zone that had to be sharp, on point, and on time, and it was all those things.
Right.
The throw over the back shoulder to Garrett Wilson in the end zone. I mean, these just aren't passes we've seen out of Ohio State quarterbacks other than Haskins in recent history.
Yeah, and we've not seen the.
I think that
sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just going to say, I think that to me was the biggest thing, and I think that the offensive line, some of the blocks that are getting thrown, like I think the offensive line, as it continues to gel, just gets better and better as the year goes on. Mm-hmm. It's a process of those guys playing together and coming together as a unit, and I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to help Dobbins and it's going to help Fields. And you saw that on Dobbins' big run. You saw it on Fields' big run last week. I think that Cincinnati's a real team, and I think they just showed really well yesterday how well, when all the things click, Ohio State can be, and I just didn't think they'd have that good of a showing after what we saw from FAU. So I was surprised to the upside.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I was going to say, with respect to the passing game, not only did you see some of these, very accurate throws, both on the run and from the pocket, but you saw receivers going up and competing for the football. Like, we haven't seen that for a couple of years before now, where you have guys going up, high pointing the football, bringing it down in traffic. You saw Ben Victor with a really nice catch along the sidelines on a back shoulder fade, where he went up and competed the football. You already mentioned the Garrett Wilson catch for the touchdown. So that was something I noticed that was different from recent past. So, Paige, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, just like Tim said, that was an awesome performance. When we did the pod last week, I think we both kind of thought, well, it's just going to be a close game. And then I thought, nah, you know what? Contrarian point of view, they should probably win this game, win it handedly. I think one of the big things, that's really encouraging is the changes that they probably made, or not probably made, but definitely made with the coaching. I think, there was obvious things that they wanted to focus on and get better at. Mm-hmm. Clearly they did, all phases of the game. I think Ryan Day, he kind of called out Dobbins a little bit after the performance against FAU. I thought we saw a totally different Dobbins than we did in the first game. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think he heard that probably loud and clear. Mm-hmm. The defense is sick. Chase Young is a scary, scary man. That guy is just, he wreaks havoc. Browning on the defensive side was making plays all over the field. Sean Wade making plays all over the field.
Yeah.
Just got athletes, like TG said, and just unleash those guys. It was just an all-around great effort. And then the other thing is Fields is amazing.
Yeah.
The throw teammates are NFL caliber. I wouldn't say that he's got Dwayne Haskins' arm talent, but he's not far behind.
I think it's pretty close.
And so, yeah, I do too. I don't think there's that much of a drop off. That dude he's just making NFL throws to the outside. And the one thing I kept thinking of, like with JT, it's like they were afraid to throw the ball to the outside, and they would have to play the game within the hash marks with Fields. And obviously with Haskins, it's just the playbook is just wide open.
Yeah.
Those the receivers are just constantly open. There's a player within 5 yards of them over and over and over again. So it was just a dominant effort. It was great to see.
Great. Yeah, I had an end zone view of the game for the most part. We were sitting in the north stands. And to see Fields throw those balls on those outs, I mean, the hash marks in the college game are wider than they are in the NFL. And that's like a 35-yard throw to the outside the hash, just to complete a 12-yard pass, and the ball flies. I mean, it shoots. It's like he's got a cannon. I mean, the ball flies off his arm. I honestly think, like to you, what you were just saying, I think he and Haskins both had the same quarterback coach, and to me the mechanics look similar. Haskins was further along in his development last year than Fields is now. But I don't think they're that far off as passers, just from the naked eye. CP, what did you see on Saturday that stood out?
Well, I can tell you I'm going to start out by saying two things. I even more think that this team can win the national championship, and also 3 out of the 4 times that we've played Cincinnati, we've gone to the national championship.
That's right.
Nice little stat to think about right there. So,
I like that.
Yeah. So, I think Justin Fields is a lot further ahead than I thought he would be in terms of passing.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, he completed over 70% of his passes, and I think that he is smart. He threw intentionally 40% of his passes away yesterday. Were intentionally thrown away because he didn't see anything he liked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most things that impressed me the most was the offensive line.
Yeah.
I think they were so good at one point, it seemed like, Fields forgot about the clock in his head because no Bearcat D linemen were getting to him, and he felt so comfortable in that pocket. So for that, I was very, excited to see. I think we've got depth at that offensive line, and it's only going to get better, I think, as TG mentioned earlier. And obviously, I think the tailback situation appears to be resolved. Dobbins obviously being the first string, and Master Teague. I think he firmly placed himself as the backup.
I agree.
And I think that's going to keep Dobbins running with a chip on his shoulder. So, but yesterday he looked like the elite back he did when he was a freshman.
Yep.
So and I gotta be. I really liked that circus catch that Garrett Wilson, our true freshman, made in the end zone. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you remember seeing that, but that was spectacular, and that's a true freshman.
Yeah.
He seems to have a really good chemistry going right now with Benjamin Victor. Austin Mack made, I think, 5 or 6 catches yesterday as well. I think the defense, they're only going to get better. I saw players like Tommy Togai yesterday make some amazing plays, even though he had that one bad penalty where I don't even think it should have been called, where he shoved the quarterback.
That was ticky-tack.
But he was all over and Browning was all over the field as well. I mean, he was in that first half, he was in 75 to 80% of the tackles. And, I would have liked to seen, Chase Young's case for the Heisman for him to take that ball into the end zone with the interception. But I'm sure he'll get a chance to do that again. But that was it was right there. And, those Heisman voters like a little bit of that pizzazz, so that would have been nice for him to take that in. But, I think I didn't think it was going to be a close game yesterday. As I said on an email thread that we have, I thought we'd blow them out. I knew we'd definitely cover the spread. So that was it was nice to see us come out, and it was nice to keep them out of the end zone, just to get that shutout. So
yeah,
I'm really excited. I will. Like, one thing that did crack me up was just how slow Tough Borland is after that interception. But he had a great game. Pete Werner I think he's a stud. I like the depth that we have on defense, and I think, like as Tim alluded to earlier, I think it's just only going to start to gel a little bit more. But overall, I think we looked really good, man. And I like the play calling. Teams are just not going to know what we've got so many weapons and so many looks. So
yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a shout out to the Big Ten yesterday too. How about Maryland thumping Syracuse 63-20?
Yeah, the Big Ten East is looking a lot tougher now. Yeah, I mean, you add Maryland now to the mix with that offense, and you have to contend with that team. Yeah. In addition to all the the typical heavyweights. JT, I just wanted to get your before we move on and look at kind of individual positions, and I wanted to get your overall impressions of yesterday. Were you able to see the whole game? Did you see everything? What did you see?
Well, I did see the whole game, and the one thing that I just want to make sure everybody recognizes is the fact that I'm the only one who called this score exactly correct at 42-zap.
Oh, nice. I didn't see that.
Just recognize that, PG.
Yeah, dude, I don't know.
Zach, that was this morning at 10:30.
Yeah, dude.
Good work, Diddy.
That's the fucking bullshit.
So I just recognize, number one.
Duly noted.
Number two, I think we're kind of discounting last week's game, going up 28-zap and within 9 minutes. I think it's pretty hard to stay in the game against FAU with 28-zap. So I think that was, I think we kind of discounted that a bit. On the other hand, I think the game plan, not to mention the athletes, clearly completely outmatched Cincinnati. But I don't think Fickle had an answer for that and was just clearly outcoached. I don't remember any time playing Cincinnati where we smacked them down like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was I didn't expect it to be quite that bad either. I was surprised at how easy it looked after the first quarter. It was pretty competitive in the first quarter, but then afterwards, after that first 15 minutes, I was surprised how they pretty much did anything they wanted. They got the running game going. It started with that first big run off the left side by Dobbins. I want to say it went for 25, 30 yards, and who was it that made the point earlier about the offensive line? Maybe it was you, Paige, or I think it might have been you, Paige, or Tim. That left side of the offensive line is pretty gnarly. I mean, especially if you think of Jonah Jackson, the transfer there, and at left guard. And then who's our left tackle? Why am I blanking on his name? Help me out here. Who's our left tackle?
Munford,
right, yeah. So those guys, I thought it wasn't a coincidence that they continued to go off to the left side. I think, and then, of course, they sprung the big long run for 60 yards after that. And then Justin Fields had a touchdown run off the left side as well. He also got a little help from Dobbins, who led through the hole and took out a linebacker or a safety, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, that's what you want to see, right? You want your left tackle at Ohio State should be your best offensive lineman, and Jonah Jackson was, he was pretty heralded, and a lot of top programs wanted Jonah Jackson as a grad transfer out of Rutgers, and he's proven to be every bit as good as advertised. So I think that bodes well for the running game that they got that, they got the left side of that line going, and I would expect that's going to be kind of where that's going to be their bread and butter in the run game. Going forward. So I wanted to focus real quick.
I'd like to say one other thing
Go ahead, CP.
I'd like to say one other thing that I don't think anybody has really mentioned that, he was questionable before the game last week, but DeMarco McCall, man, that kid, I like what he's like, the way he looks so far this year, returning kickoffs and punts, and,
right.
I think he's going to be an integral piece to our success this season.
Well,
Special teams and things of that nature.
Well, it's interesting you bring him up because I honestly agree with you. I think he's talented. He's got big playability. He can do a lot of different things, but I'm having a hard time seeing where he fits in right now, especially with Master Teague emerging as you said, what looks like our clear number 2 running back. Maybe they move him and give him a little more time at H. I mean, it certainly doesn't really factor into the wide receiver rotation. I don't know. What do you guys think? Where does he kind of factor in long-term outside of special teams? Go ahead, CP.
I would much rather see him returning kickoffs and punts than KJ Hill in the punts because,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, KJ Hill is solid, but there was a couple times yesterday he made me nervous. There was like that catch on the sideline there. He shouldn't have dropped that ball. You know what I mean? There was a couple he dropped, and he just, he makes me a little bit nervous back there on those punt returns. So, I mean, I think he's got big playability, and like you said, I don't know where he can fit him in, but I think that Dave will get a couple schemes where he can get him in and get his hands on the ball.
I hope so. And, the other thing is his health, right? He's just hasn't been able to stay healthy most of his career, and even last week, he got off to a great start. He against FAU, he almost broke the opening kickoff. He had a great punt return, but then later in the game, I want to say like mid third quarter, he took a hit, and I know he came back, but he wasn't quite himself after that. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see where he fits in going forward. It's certainly nice to have the depth with playmakers. Hey, TG, I wanted to go back to you.
Do they have him?
Sorry, go ahead, PVH.
Do they have McCall as the number 2 back, or is it Teague?
It's either or. So on the depth chart, it's DeMario McCall or Master Teague as the backup running back. But we saw that Teague got the lion's share of the carries yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that ship has sailed, man. I mean, I'm sorry, but Master Teague needs to fucking play.
Yeah,
I agree. Is a bull.
That boy,
right?
He runs. I love his pace and power runner.
Yeah, man. I mean, it kind of reminds me a teeny bit of Lendell White, right?
Yeah.
The old USC, man. That dude is just, I mean, he's not slow, but my God, after contact, and it looks like he relishes contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
And isn't he just a true freshman, or is he a redshirt freshman?
I think he's a sophomore. Is he a true sophomore? He played a little bit last year, but I don't know.
Sophomore.
He is a sophomore. Okay, yeah. I heard a good analogy for Teague, actually, earlier today. I can't remember who said it. It was on one of the podcasts I'd listened to. Joe Montgomery, remember him? He played in that 98 team. He played behind Michael Wiley. And it was kind of a similar thing, right? You had Wiley, who was the quicker, kind of breakaway, more elusive, had the breakaway speed, and then he was complemented by Montgomery, who'd come in and wasn't quite as fast, but much like Teague, relished the contact, and was a great second option. And I tend to agree with you, PBH, that he's solidly entrenched now as your number 2. TG, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I see Teague being the number 2. I think probably through these first 2 games it was an either or. I wouldn't be surprised to see him squarely as the backup. I think he's the better back. I think McCall is good for punt returns and kick returns and stuff like that. But as you said, between his health and just finding a role for him, they switched him from special teams to the backs room to the wide receivers room. Like, he just hasn't really had a definitive role on the team. And, I think the guy's talented, but I'd much rather see Master Teague taking the snaps after Dobbins and using McCall as maybe a backup to the H-back, and then definitely taking punt and kick returns.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I don't think is going to stick is C.J. Saunders as your backup H behind K.J. Hill. I mean, he's hurt now, so Jalen Gill has been listed as the number 2 H behind Hill for the last 2 weeks. And I know he's a senior. He's worked hard. He's a walk-on, right? Earned a scholarship, but I don't know where he factors in at all. And I would think, McCall might be taking snaps from here by the end of the season, or from C.J. Saunders. McCall might be taking some snaps from him by the end of the year at H-back. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
Another person we haven't really mentioned too, like Chris Olave. That kid is a baller.
Olave, yeah. He's. I might. Yeah. Well, Paige and I were talking about this last week, and we were debating. Okay, so who's the number 1 wide receiver on this team? If you think about, I guess you could come up with a few answers, but I don't know. I didn't have to think too much about it, and I think it's Olave.
I'd have to agree with
Couldn't
you.
agree
and then
more.
I would go with Victor.
And then after him, you'd go with Victor?
Yep, and then Victor and Mac after yesterday.
Okay.
But Garrett Wilson is going to see time, man. After that catch he made in the end zone, that kid's going to see the field a lot this year.
Yeah. I think this year they're going to tighten up the receiver rotation a little bit. I think last year they rotated in 6 guys, including Hill, Mack, Victor, Olave, and then you had the 3 kids that just left, right? Terry McLaurin, by the way, did you guys see Terry McLaurin had a 70-yard touchdown catch today for the Redskins?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and Johnny Dixon and Paris Campbell, they were rotating, what was that, 6, 7 guys in there. I think we're going to look. I think your core guys are Hill, Victor, Mack, and Olave. You sprinkle in Wilson there as the young guy, but I think those are the 4 guys that they're gonna ride or die with this year. Hill, Victor, Mack, and Olave. What do you guys think about
agree.
that? Yeah, JT, what do you think?
That's a pretty.
Agreed, but I'm slicing ribeyes.
All right, PVH, what do you think?
Say that's a solid wide receiver core, though.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of playmaking ability there, and those guys, they all have good hands, and I think they can do a little something with the after the catch. PVH, what do you think?
Right.
Yeah, man, it's just a plethora of options.
Good problem to have. And Jeremy Ruckert, let's not forget about him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he didn't even did he even get a catch though against Cincinnati?
The tight ends weren't early in the gameplay yesterday, and
No.
And obviously you saw in week 1 there was a heavy presence of tight ends, but yesterday was it was non-existent. But that's the beautiful thing that we have that.
No,
He's
I agree.
Just setting them up, right? He's just more and more things that you have to scheme for. Probably. 1 week, we might focus more of a pro-style attack, go tight end, and next week do something totally different.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Hey, Z, I would tell you I got a bit of a different view on the receivers.
Okay.
If I had to rank them 1 to 4, and let's take Hill out because I think he's different, right? He's an H. I take Olave, Wilson, Mack, and Victor in that order.
Okay.
I think Olave and Wilson are your 2 most natural wide receivers. They run good routes. They've got good hands. They get separation. Mm-hmm. They're both really young, and they're going to be way better than any wide receiver, maybe say for Michael Thomas, we've seen in the last 10 years. I think Mack and Victor but I like because they're seniors. It's taken them 4 years to get here. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ben Victor can still hide behind a blade of grass. The guy needs to put on another 30 pounds. His height is great, and he's getting there. But let's face it, the guy's been a 4-year project.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think where we sit today, you play them because they're seniors. They've got the experience. They can help the younger guys come along. But if you ask me what 2 receivers I want on the field, it's Olave and Wilson.
Okay. So Wilson,
I'm 100% on that, but I think he's already. I feel like I agree with you. The blade of grass comment. That's right on. But
Victor.
I feel like he's developing a relationship with Victor because Victor's. I think he's got more catches and yards than anybody has in the first 2 games.
So Victor is listed as 6'4", 199 on the depth chart. 6'4", 199. That's to your point, TG. The guy could hide behind a blade of grass. He's very slight, and he has been good through these first 2 games. But can you? I don't know if you can really hang your hat on that because he has had the tendency then to disappear for weeks at a time. And in the case of Wilson, you're betting on his potential, right? You're betting on the upside there, even though we haven't seen it yet. We're betting on the upside.
Oh, we saw it in the end zone yesterday.
We did.
Hey, can we get a ribeye? Can we get a ribeye update from Jimmy? How those ribeyes doing, Jimmy?
I've got 1 slice. I'm getting heat from my dog and my son. My daughter's already eaten, but they came out perfect on the big green egg. Bananas, Bino.
All right.
Paige, last week we were talking about Shaun Wade, and you had mentioned him as one of your the absolute top 11 guys on defense. He has to be out there, and we didn't see much of him for some reason in week 1, or so it seemed. He was huge yesterday. He had 2 pass breakups. One of them resulted in an interception. The second was almost intercepted by Chase Young. and then he had the big sack and strip. Ohio State wasn't able to fall on it, but it seemed like he was all over the field. What did you see out of Wade yesterday?
Well, like we said, right? He's one of the best athletes on the team. I mean, you can just see it, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to, he needs to be on the field, and when he's on the field, he's making plays. He lit that one dude. Wasn't he the one that hit the receiver where the ball went up in the air and then Chase Young dropped it? Wasn't he the one that laid that lick?
That was him.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just, you got playmakers, man. You just figure it out and put them on the field. So
Arnett was around the ball a lot yesterday too, which was nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, he got beat on a long ball. Actually, that happened right in front of us, but that was actually a hell of a throw. And he got his arm right in there, played the football. I just tend to think that was, a pretty good throw, although, in the case of Arnett, we've seen that a lot with him, unfortunately. But, that's it, through 2 games, that's really the only big play this defense has given up. And, that happened, I think Ohio State was up 35-0 at that point. So, it really wasn't a meaningful big play.
Hey, Zach, on that, did you happen to hear Hafley's interview after the game?
I missed it. No, what did he say?
No.
So, super interesting, talking about that specific play. He said that Arnett came off the field, and Hafley told him, "You're done for the day." Arnett unclipped his shoulder pads, hadn't taken them off, but basically mentally checked out, pads unclipped, loose, sitting there. And then I can't remember, something happened. I don't exactly remember what it was. And Hafley said, "You got to go back in. We need you back in for this next series." And that's when that play happened. And Hafley said, "Guys, that's on me. That's not Arnett's fault. I've got his back. That's on me." And so I thought it was a super interesting interview because A, that explains it, but B, when you got a coach basically saying that's my fault, how much more does that player want to play for that coach when he's got his back like that?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, and for the most part, Arnett he's been really, really good. And he's also, he's a physical corner too. I like the way he plays the run. He's not afraid to come up and, put a lick on a tailback, a large, a bigger player. So I think he's been good. And I said before the season started, I thought Arnett would benefit from the new coaching staff. I think clearly he suffered probably more than any kid in that secondary when
Holmes.
Who's our old defensive backs coach? Combs, that's right. Yeah, when Combs left. Arnett, I think, was a much better player with Combs. And, it sounds like Hafley has done, wonders for Arnett so far. So that'll be something to watch.
How nice was it to see yesterday, or in the first 2 games, not one big run play get through our defense.
Yeah,
that was just, to me, that is one of the most comfortable things that I've seen so far. Because even against early in the season last year, teams that shouldn't have done anything on us were breaking runs for 30 and 40 yards.
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't see that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, average running backs were breaking off, 50, 60-yard runs on us. And there's been nothing this year. It's been stifling. I mean, and to me, I just feel like they made the logical adjustments, right? You move the linebackers off 2-3 yards from behind the line of scrimmage so they can read and react. And it does seem, and I'm not smart enough to know exactly what's been done, but it does seem that they're thinking less and reacting. They're able to play fast. And it seems like this defense is playing fast, and there isn't that second of hesitation, as there was last year, where you might see a guy processing something, and by then it's too late, right? And so you definitely, that's noticeable, and you can see that. Well, why don't we switch over to the defense then for a little bit? I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Who, outside of the obvious choices, who really stood out to you? So we're taking Chase Young out of discussion for a moment. Malik Harrison, Jeffrey Okudah. Who else stood out to you guys in yesterday's performance? Paige, why don't we start with you?
It's Browning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he played a lot, and I don't watch every, I I can't keep it all straight in my head, right? Is Borland in or Browning's in? But it seemed to me like Browning took a lot of snaps.
He did.
And he was just a different player, right? I mean, he was just in the mix. He was all over the field. And it just seemed like it kind of clicked for him. And it seems like, to me, it might just be a matter of time before he's, your starter or getting the lion's share of the snaps.
Yeah, I would love to. There is a participation.
And who's 11? Who's 11 on the line?
Tyreek Smith.
Number 11.
Tyreek Smith. He had a big sack.
Yep.
That dude, too.
Tyreek Smith, solid.
Yeah. He was.
Devon Hamilton.
He had a
played well,
massive
too.
sack, right?
Oh, yeah, a big-time lick.
Yep.
I'm surprised that kid hung onto the ball. Hey, TG, who stood out to you outside of the obvious guys on the defensive side of the ball?
So I'd say Paige hit the two that I would say, Browning and Smith. Smith only had 2 tackles, but he had the sack. I can remember watching him last year as a true freshman, thinking this guy's going to be legit, and he's getting playing time because Jonathan Cooper's injured. And I think it's going to be hard to keep the kid off the field. I think he's absolutely amazing. The other one that stood out to me, and this gets more thematically to what I think Day talks about with respect to the defense, is Dallas Gant. And, maybe he wasn't all over the field and he was in kind of late, but think about this for a minute. The reason Ohio State got the shutout is because as the guy's reaching the ball over the line late in garbage time to score a touchdown, Dallas Gant swats it out of his hand. Ohio State recovers it in the end zone for a touchback. And that's kind of what Day talks about with not giving up, toughness, playing to the whistle on every single play. Like, we just didn't see these things last year.
I agree.
But there's a big difference between 42-7 and 42-0.
Yeah.
Hapley talked about it in his interview, that when you can absolutely shut somebody out, think about what it took. It took a blocked field goal. It took an interception in our territory, and then it took Dallas Gant swatting the guy reaching for a touchdown off to keep that that shutout.
Yeah.
And so, I look at that, and this guy's like down the depth chart, but here he is making great plays. Like, there's so many guys on defense making plays. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, and he'll have his day, right? We'll be hearing from Gant. Probably as soon as next year, he'll have his day. I didn't realize it was Gant that it. So that's the one thing about actually being at the game, and I haven't had a chance to watch, the replay all the way through. I didn't realize it was Gant that had forced that fumble and forced the touchback, and I think that actually happened on the other end of the field from us. So it was really hard to see. At that stage, I was watching the game on the jumbotron. You know who I was watching, and he didn't get a ton of run. On special teams he did, and then he came in late, was Josh Proctor. And he's got an interesting physique for a guy playing safety. He's being compared a lot to Malik Hooker, but Proctor's got a totally different physique. He's tall and kind of wiry, thin, wiry, strong, a little bit like an Ed Reed type build. And I just think he was fascinating to watch, and he absolutely flies. He is an explosive player. I cannot wait until he gets his opportunity. He might even be a better player than Jordan Fuller now, but Fuller's the veteran. He's steady back there. He's not gonna beat out Jordan Fuller. He's just gonna have to wait his turn. But while he didn't make a ton of plays, Proctor just stood out to me. Just watching him run around out there, he is an impressive looking athlete. JT, what about you? You got anything to add to this kind of players under the radar?
Game plan? No, I'm going to say the game plan and the execution of the game plan by the coaches. I think that they're my MVP for yesterday.
All right.
With a mouthful of fucking ribeye, bro.
Exactly. Medium rare asparagus.
The asparagus. What was the crowd like at the game, Zach?
It was good. It was lively. Actually, it was, well, I guess, we went to, Ohio State went over to semesters, right? And when we were on the quarter system, this time of year, that game would kind of be, I guess, muted because, I don't know, either kids are just getting started or classes haven't started yet. And, but, the campus was just, the fall quarter had started, so it was a buzz the whole time we were there. So it was a good crowd, perfect weather, mid-70s. And it was cool to kind of have the perspective that I did from the north stands, being able to see Just see holes open up. And honestly, earlier in the game, we were talking about J.K. Dobbins, and things weren't looking good there early on. And I think I'd even sent you guys a text. In his defense, there just was nothing there early on. And you can see that from the perspective I was on. You wouldn't be able to see it from television. But since I don't know if they had extra men in the box, but they were really, clogging those running lanes early on. The other thing that was really cool to see from the perspective that I was sitting at was on some of those, the quarterback sacks that Ohio State had where the pocket collapsed on those passings. It's amazing how quickly the pocket collapsed and how explosive Chase Young is off the edge. He's Tim, I know you've gone to a lot of games and you've seen him play in person a lot, but this is the second time I've seen him play in person, but the first time I've seen him playing at this level. It is otherworldly how explosive he is off the edge and how quickly he gets to the quarterback. And then, of course, when he makes impact, it's like watching a tiger just take out it was impressive.
And I think somebody sent around a picture earlier this year, and I think that he's been hitting the weight room. Mickey Mariotti's been doing good things with him. I mean, he's a man among boys out there. Mm-hmm. And just give this some thought for 1 minute. It wouldn't really happen, but in theory, Ohio State could still have Nick Bosa and Chase Young.
I know.
In theory.
In theory, yeah.
Right? That would be, and then plus the interior defensive lineman. I mean, it could be the greatest defensive line of all time.
Yeah.
But he's going to get double teamed, and I think he's going to do fine with the double teams. But that's going to leave Tyreek Smith and Jonathan Cooper and Robert Landers and the rest of those guys free to beat their single teams. And I expect big things out of the line because Chase is going to eat up so many offensive linemen.
Well, the other thing that is really, really effective in the pass rush is Malik Harrison. They bring him a lot on pressure, and actually, both he and Chase Young, I think, were credited with half a sack on one play. Malik came from one side, and Young came from the other. And again, the explosive. They are such explosive players, big dudes too. So that's another thing that kind of just adds to that the push that we're getting from the front four, that you can bring a guy off the edge like Malik Harrison from linebacker, and he can get to the quarterback. Like, it's not just token pressure. I thought he was impressive too. Malik Harrison. Paige and I were talking last week about who we would identify as the three best players on that defense, and I think Malik Harrison is clearly one of the three best. Right now, I mean, I think he's clearly on his way to a first team All Big Ten, campaign, and then I would identify Young and then Jeffrey Okudah as well. Those would be my three best players.
Okudah's the man.
Yeah. Any other observations from the defense?
Not leave out. Yes, I would say Devon Hamilton played a great game. He's going to be the year progresses, and I'm telling you, I mentioned him earlier. Number 72, Togai.
Tommy Togai, yeah.
Yeah, Togai's going to be a beast.
Where's that dude from? Is he legit? Is he from Hawaii?
He's from Washington, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
No, he believe it or not, he grew up in Idaho.
That's right.
But he's a whatever. He's an American Samoa or whatever. Yeah, he's one of those Pacific Islanders that's fucking stronger than everyone in the world.
Yeah, and by the way,
Idaho.
That roughing the passer penalty.
Oh God!
I mean, okay, you can't do it, right? It was so stupid, and I was screaming at the T. Yeah, but I'm like, really? Like, we've come to this? Like, he put two hands on the guy and they threw the penalty, and it's just so you shake your head. It's like, oh my God, it's just pathetically sad.
Well, it's even scarier with college refs.
Like penalty,
because you just never know what they're going to call. I just think it's so the rule is so wide open to interpretation to begin with, and I think it's so inconsistently applied. And I agree with you. I thought it was ticky-tack, and the stadium went berserk when that flag came out because everybody knew what it was. You saw that, there were three guys that got pressure. They got pressure right up the middle, and that quarterback was running for his life. And I thought the timing, it wasn't late. Like, he released the ball and he gave him a little shove. I didn't think it was, yeah. Like I said, you can't trust.
Bush League call. That's
But
another
they're going
thing.
to call
like,
that too, though. You know they're going to call that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's another thing we give the props to the Buckeyes so far through 2 games is the number of the few penalties that have been called against us. Last year, I think through the first 2 games, there was like 15 penalties. So that's been refreshing.
Yeah,
if you will.
No, that's a good point. I think we were one of the most penalized teams in the country last year, and they've been much better about it. Certainly at key moments, maybe at garbage time, some of the reserves are getting a few flags, but overall, when it really counts, they've been pretty mistake free. The other thing I noticed was it didn't seem like Brendan White factored in that much, or hasn't really factored in that much yet this year. Like. I think they basically been alternating him and Wade. It doesn't seem like, I don't know if the coaching staff isn't all that taken with White but I thought that was interesting because the way that he finished last year, he was the Rose Bowl defensive MVP and really helped solidify the back end of that defense when he came in the Nebraska game and he won the job, and he really hasn't been much of a factor. Am I seeing that? Is that what you guys are seeing, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a difference, right? Because last year those guys had to make plays after play after play after play. I think our defensive line is so good and the linebackers are playing well that they don't have to be making the amount of plays. I think you could say the same thing about Fuller. I mean, there's just isn't as many as opportunities because I think nothing's getting to those guys.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, although
100%.
Yeah. Although Damon Arnett led him in tackles.
I was going to make that exact point.
Interesting. Although that said, Damon Arnett and Jordan Fuller led him in tackles yesterday. But no, I tend to agree, right? There's these guys aren't having to chase ball carriers, 25, 30 yards down the field. Tim, you were going to make a point. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to make the exact point that PVH made, which I totally agree with. I think that when you got linebackers making the plays that they should make, then the safeties don't have to make them. I mean, as you pointed out, Arnett and Fuller were the top 2 tacklers, but numbers 3, 4, and 5 were Browning, Harrison, and Werner. Mm-hmm. I probably wasn't the case one time last year.
That you could be right about that. Browning was definitely more of a presence than I've ever seen him before. I think yesterday might have been his best game. It seemed like he was in position, running ball carriers down. I didn't see him getting picked off. Maybe he did, but it seemed like he was getting off blocks better. I thought this was the first time we kind of started to see him really emerge.
And I think, to your point there, D, is because he is a player that he's got the speed, he's got the talent, and they're giving him the ability just to run on the field, let his speed and his athleticism take over, as opposed to like being in this scheme that Giano and Grinch were trying to put together where, all that bullshit, and he's actually just being able to fly all over the field and do what he does best, and it's like chase the ball.
Can we talk about Tuff Borland's interception for a second and just how...
No, we can't.
Do you realize?
No, we can't.
Do you realize he got run down by an offensive lineman? It was a Cincinnati offensive lineman that ran him out of bounds. I mean,
it was painful to watch.
It was
painful.
Well, so that again, that happened.
Did you guys see that stuff?
I was just going to say they were marching into the end zone. Cincinnati was on that drive. They were heading toward the end zone that I was sitting behind, and I watched again. It was it was our guy Wade who broke up that pass, and it ends up in Borland's hands, and there was nothing. Not to use a cliche, but there was nothing but green grass in front of him. I mean, if anybody else on that defense comes up with that ball, it's a touchdown. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I was like, oh, that's a touchdown. We stood up, and I'm like, he's gone. And then there were several Cincinnati players that caught up to him, including a fucking guard.
As I stated earlier yesterday, as like when I beat Paige one-on-one in Prada loafers, I think I could have outran that offensive lineman in a pair of Prada loafers. He looked like a gorilla.
Whatever.
Were you guys able to see? I'm kind of just jumping around, but we were talking about McCall in the return game. I don't know if you guys were able to see this on TV, but they actually had both Hill and McCall back receiving punts. Remember how Tressel used to like to do that with Gonzalez and Ginn? But they did that all game long. They had both Hill and McCall out there back in punt receiving formation, so they had both sides of the field covered. I don't know if you guys could see that from television. I thought that was interesting. I had not seen them do that in a very long time.
I did,
Hey,
and
D-boy.
that's like I said earlier. Yeah, buddy.
So, a time sanity check here. I do think it's I do think it's a worthwhile endeavor to spend 5 or 10 minutes on our friends up north, and that embarrassment.
Let's do it.
Oh man,
Put on the field.
Wait. So hold on one sec before we go there. One quick question for Zach, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here.
Yeah, sure.
But
Go ahead, buddy.
what was it like when that guy had the epileptic spasms or whatever he had? What was that stadium like? Because that was scary.
Well, nobody knew what was happening. So, I mean, unless you were able to, I guess now there's Wi-Fi at the stadium now. So maybe people on, who could access Twitter or the radio broadcast knew, but I didn't know what was going on. I just assumed we were all following the play. And then you look back toward the line of scrimmage and you could see the kid was down. I mean, they sent out the stretcher. First they sent out the cart. Then they set on a stretcher, so nobody knew what was going on. Like, when they sent out the cart, I'm like, oh, it's a knee injury. We blew out his knee. It's a lower leg injury. Maybe, is it a Joe Theismann type injury? And then they send out the stretcher, and I was like, okay, wait, is it a neck thing? Or they got to stabilize his head? But it was pretty somber, and the entire Cincinnati bench, everybody from the bench came out to the field and surrounded him, and then several of the Ohio State captains came out. Dobbins was out there. And then he just kind of came to, it looked like, but it took a few minutes, but obviously very somber. And, for a while there, we were all kind of expecting the worst. It just turned out to be a seizure. And then I saw later on the replay, somebody had actually put a clip on Twitter of it where he just fell over on his own. And his arms were kind of flailing. I don't know. What did it look like on TV? I've never seen something like that.
Looked like he went into a seizure, and he was about to, one of the receivers, I forget who it was about to block him, and then just didn't know what to do because he started convulsing.
Yeah. Yeah. So
but I will say, Buckeye Nation showed a lot of class there.
They did.
You're pretty familiar with convulsions, Jimmy.
Only when I lose my legs.
So, all right. So, do we want to spend a little time on our friends from up north, as Paige calls them?
Pipe down to it.
What did you guys watch?
I'm surprised they didn't jump us this week.
Yeah. Well, so they dropped. I saw in the coaches poll to number 10, I think, from number 7, and then we were jumped. That's our dogs going off in the background there. Sorry about that. Ohio State was jumped by.
Oh, now Johnny's going.
Oh, there we go. Ohio State was jumped by LSU after the big win against Texas.
The name of this podcast, like the Kennel Podcast.
Yeah, right.
So we dropped to number 6, I think. Certainly in the AP poll. I don't know about the coaches poll, but LSU jumped us after the big win against Texas.
Yeah, it was same thing.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't have a problem with it. Big deal. It doesn't matter at this stage.
No, whatever. It all played out.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know what? One thing I will say about the Texas game, I love Matthew McConaughey pulling into game day in that Lincoln, like that old school Lincoln with the horns on the front, and they get their asses punked. I love that.
So I assume.
He almost ripped
Well,
Lee
what's clear to me is
Corso's
no
head
one
off.
plays any defense.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, there was a lot of scoring in that game. I didn't see much of the game, so I don't really feel like I can comment that much about it. I saw the very tail end. I saw Joe Burrow seal that game on a really pretty nifty throw, right? He was under pressure. He finds that receiver, and then that kid turns it upfield, for another 50 yards or so to pretty much put the nail in the coffin.
He threw for 471 yards.
Wow. Yeah, well, think about that. Back to TG's point about depth of ridiculous talent on the roster. I mean, in theory, Burrow could still be on our roster.
Yeah.
I mean, last year you had Burrow, you had Haskins. I mean, it's crazy the depth of talent they have.
But Joey B doesn't. Yeah, Joey B doesn't run a 4.3 40 either, like JF. So
No,
I'll take Justin.
Yeah, me too. So, all right. So
I'm excited, boys. I'm very excited.
Me too. So the game ends yesterday, and it was almost the perfect ending to a great day. The game ends. We're leaving the stadium, and then I actually logged into my DirecTV account on my phone to pull up the Michigan game, and there they are just fighting for their lives against Army. And my buddy Mike and I stopped for a couple of minutes just to watch. We were still inside the stadium, and we were going to meet some friends, but we had to see what would happen in this game. And just a bunch of strangers just huddle around me, and we were all watching them line up for that kick that Army missed, and it went to overtime. But that would have just been a perfect ending to a great day. I know we're supposed to root for Michigan to win, but at this stage, I don't know.
No, we're not.
Yeah, no, we're not. I could.
For the record, I want them to be undefeated when we play them. I always do. I know, like Gallagher and a couple other people don't like that, but I want them to be undefeated when we kick their ass again and send the khaki motherfucker out the door.
That's not going to happen because the team I watched yesterday, that team's going to lose 3 games. And they have a bye, and then they go to Wisconsin. They have a bye, and then they go to Wisconsin. They're not winning that game. I'm sorry. And the other thing is
they're not that team.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, one more thing, Paige, and then I'll give it over to you. Shea Patterson, are we sure he's going to be their starting quarterback by the time we play them? Because I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure he's the best guy they have. Anyway, Paige, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
That kid at all.
Yeah.
Well, no, so I didn't watch much of the game until the Ohio State game was over. But the little that I did watch, it's the same old thing, right? They're slow. They don't have any skilled players, at least on offense. And, they're supposed to have these phenomenal receivers. What was telling to me with the game on the line, they were just running the ball up the middle. It was almost like they were afraid to pass the ball.
Yeah.
And then it was right before it got into overtime, and then they went for it on 4th and 1, and they didn't get it. But that team, it's the same old team, right, that we've seen for years and years. And, I saw some guy reference, to your point, Zach, are we sure he's even the best quarterback on their team? So maybe they have somebody else. I don't know who potentially it would be. But they had no confidence against Army in the fourth quarter to have Shea Patterson to say, go win us this game.
Yeah.
They didn't.
No.
They just ran the ball up the middle with their, mediocre running back who, would be the fourth, stringer on our team. So that team, there's no way it's going undefeated. So they'll probably get their ass killed by Wisconsin.
I agree. So there's a couple things regarding the offense. The first is, they brought in this Josh Gaddis, right, who is supposed to, install this RPO spread attack that was going to make Michigan just multiple and very difficult to defend, and you bring them into the modern era of offense. And when push came to shove, what happened, right? And that late in the fourth quarter, what was Michigan doing? It was, they were lining up. It was Jim Harbaugh basically grabbed the playbook from Gaddis and took over. And that was the big question, okay, Gaddis, is he really going to have the power, the latitude to actually call the plays? Or when push comes to shove, is Harbaugh going to take over and try and ram it down your throat, with a fullback? So the other point I wanted to make is Michigan's vaunted offensive line. Everybody talking about this vaunted offensive line that was supposed to, vault Michigan into the playoff this year. Zach Charbonnet, their starting tailback, 33 carries, 100 yards on 33 carries. I mean, this is against Army. Against Army. And then, Paige, to your point about the receivers, Nico Collins, 2 catches for 32 yards. Tyreek Black, 3 catches for 24 yards. TG, I'm interested to get your take on this. What did you see yesterday with Michigan?
I want to know what he said to your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Who's your brother-in-law?
Oh, your brother-in-law, TG.
Oh, my brother-in-law. Well, that can't be repeated on a podcast. And no, I think the word that comes to mind when you think of Michigan, and following on what PVH was saying, is they're pedestrian. They have pedestrian coaches, pedestrian players. They haven't had good recruiting classes. This guy that's their running back, Zach Charbonnet, is a true freshman. That's the best guy they can field. Dylan McCaffrey is their backup quarterback, and he's, what's his name, McCaffrey's brother. And he probably is better than Shea Patterson. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey. Donovan Peoples-Jones is their best receiver. He's injured. The defense lost a whole bunch of high draft picks, so they're starting new players. They're just not that good, and they're not that well coached. And we've seen what really good players with bad coaching get you. That was our defense last year. Mediocre players with bad coaches is a disaster. And I agree with you. Michigan's going to lose 3 games.
Yeah.
Bill Klatt.
Paige, go ahead.
So Bill Klatt, when you listen to this podcast, you blow, dude. Michigan sucks.
Well, and the other thing that you always say to me, the arrogance, right? And so I was over at Juan's watching the second half, and of course, because he's the mayor of fucking Denver, he knows everybody and his neighbors, a Michigan guy. And he's like, yeah, I was out 2 nights ago and, having beers, and this guy was there. And he's just like, oh, yeah, this is our year. And Juan's like, I seem to remember, like, I thought last year was your year, but okay, maybe, and he's just checking off all the, reasons why this is going to be their year and, blah, 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 blah. And Juan's like, okay, I'm not really seeing it. And, of course, it's just there's nothing about that team that really scares you. And they just are constantly getting all this love, like this halo Harbaugh effect that, he caught, he had Andrew Luck at Stanford, and then he, had Kaepernick in San Francisco. But are we really sure this guy's that great of a fucking coach at this point? I don't think so.
Yeah. I think the one thing that still really stands out to me, it's glaring, is the lack of speed. They look plodding, especially on offense. There just isn't enough speed. And if Michigan wants to be in the same conversation as Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, they are way behind the 8 ball, in my opinion, in the speed department. I think on both sides of the ball, but especially on offense. Even their best skilled players, Nico Collins, who's good against us, against Ohio State, and Tyreek Black, Peoples-Jones, they're big, rangy dudes. They're kind of like a Michael Thomas type wide receiver, right? A guy that a red zone receiver, a possession receiver, but not guys that you really worry about, going over the top. They're not going to beat you down the field. So to me, the lack of speed is glaring. And, I don't know. It's inexcusable at this stage because it's clear that's, if you look at the teams that qualify for the playoff every year, Oklahoma, speed all over the place. So they have to address that. And then I also think, like Ohio State did back in 2001 when they bought Tressel on, I think they have to renew their focus on the Ohio State rivalry. I think they have to invest more into that. I mean, that's what Ohio State did in 2001. They had a renewed commitment to the Michigan rivalry, and they made it the most important thing, the most important objective of the season. And that's when their fortunes turned. And they got it, and they hired a coach that understood it and, wasn't afraid of it and embraced it. And I feel like Michigan, they're going to have a similar kind of come to Jesus moment as a program, and they're going to have to get the right guy in there to right the ship. And until they do that, I think they're going to continue to flail. It's just not going to happen for them. The other thing.
Yeah, but Harbaugh's the savior, man. Like, honestly, and part of the reason why I do really want them to lose every single fucking game, because he will leave, right?
Yeah.
And then
who do you turn to?
Seriously, where do they turn?
Right.
Where do you go?
Yeah. Yeah. If not Harbaugh, then who? If not Harbaugh, then who?
If not Harbaugh, then who?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can, it can turn quickly. Like, ask frickin' Florida State or Tennessee or USC.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it could be a dumpster fire up there very, very quickly. Now, watch, they'll come off and rattle off 8 wins and pull it out. But, I mean, it's not looking good.
I don't know. I'm not seeing it. And, Yeah, and I certainly, with in relation to Ohio State, I mean, we're going on 20 years now of Ohio State being the better program in every conceivable measure. I mean, you go down, and I mentioned this to you guys over email recently, and I'm sure you would all agree that you look at all the measuring sticks, right? Results on the field, Big Ten championships, national championships, recruiting in the recruiting trails. First round NFL draft picks. I mean, Ohio State has a huge lead in all of those categories, and it's been that way for going on 20 years. And I don't think you just reverse that overnight. I don't. I mean, I think there has to be some kind of tide-changing event, and I think it probably starts with the coaching change. Somebody who really gets it. And really gets the Ohio State rivalry and really understands how Michigan has to be brought into the modern era of college football. Anyway, who else has some thoughts on that?
One thing I'll say about Harbaugh and the predicament that Michigan is in is I think they're going to be 8-3 this year. I think we're going to beat them, and I think that what you'll see happen at the end of this year is you'll start hearing choruses of people say, "Yeah, he's got to go," but that doesn't mean he's going to go. That doesn't mean the administration and the other people at the University of Michigan are going to get rid of him. It means that it could be the beginning of the end, which means it could be very well be 2, 3, 4 more years of Harbaugh up there before they finally say to the guy, all right, yeah, you got to go. And if he's making $7 million a year and trying hard and he really wants to make it work, then they may be in this morass of Harbaugh for 3 to 5 more years.
Could be.
And, that, I guess as an Ohio State fan, you kind of welcome that.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think that if he doesn't get it done this year, he's gone. I just think the discussion begins around, in earnest, what's wrong. Because right now, all their chips are in. They're on Harbaugh. They're letting him do what he wants to do, and no one's really questioning him. And so they could be in this predicament for a while, which would be great for us.
So I'm looking at Michigan's schedule.
The whole problem, to Zach's point, they need to have a come to Jesus, and they need to make Ohio State the most important thing. And then the chips fall where they should, and they start beating teams they should be beating. But Harbaugh's too arrogant, and so are Michigan fans, and so is Michigan in general to make that commitment. They don't think they have to.
I'm telling you, TG, it might even be more than 3 losses if we're talking about the team that we watched on Saturday. I'm looking at Michigan's schedule right now. So they have a bye, and then they go to Wisconsin. They play Rutgers, and then Iowa comes to town. That's never an easy game. I mean, Iowa. I know that's in the big house, but I think that game can go either way. They play Illinois, then they go to Penn State. A week later, Notre Dame comes to Michigan. The next week, they're at Maryland. All of a sudden, who wants to play Maryland? And then they got Michigan State after that. I mean, I see 4 or 5 losses there unless they can right the ship. I mean, they could lose any of those games. It could get ugly this year.
I think we can all agree that just at the end of the day, Michigan blows and fuck them.
Hear, hear. Well said, sir. Well said. All right, so we covered Michigan. Is there anything else you guys saw kind of across the national landscape you wanted to comment on? Any other games?
CU, baby. Got CU. Sorry about that, Scott.
Oh, how about that?
Not that I'm a CU guy, but
yeah,
that was a fun game.
And that was a big comeback too, right? Colorado trailed by a couple touchdowns.
Yeah,
in that one, right?
I think they were down. Yeah, they were down. So they switched over the Michigan Army game for us to the CU Nebraska game. I couldn't actually watch, but I guess that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, and not no one gives a shit about CU. But again, like Nebraska, I mean, come on.
Right.
And I know you're worried about that game, Zach, but I mean, come on. If you're not beating CU and you blow a 17-point game, and I know it's in Lincoln,
right?
The talent disparity between Ohio State and every other team in the Big Ten is just it's it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
like you're watching,
Right, it's non-existent.
one AA versus Division, one football when you flip on these other games, and it's there for the taking for Ohio State. There's just if they execute, they'll run through the Big Ten.
I agree. Yeah, just watching.
Well, the SEC, the SEC played nobody yesterday. Georgia played shit. Alabama played shit. Purdue beat Vandy, which was nice. But, the ACC blows aside from Clemson, man. The Big
How
Ten
about
is
Syracuse?
Above and beyond the best conference.
Yeah, I mean, how about Syracuse
63,
getting pummeled by Maryland, right?
Embarrassed.
Wasn't Syracuse
They
supposed
were
to be
ranked 21.
Yeah, weren't they supposed to be
Yeah.
the next best thing after Clemson in that conference? And
Yeah, and they were they gave Clemson a hell of a game last year, and Maryland embarrassed them.
wow. So
Well, that's
So,
a good topic, right?
Big Ten far
Like,
above.
sorry, go ahead.
I think the one game that was interesting to me, yesterday was Clemson, Texas A&M, 24-10.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think closer than that score might indicate. But more to the point is just there's not enough national discussion about the fact that Clemson plays absolutely nobody. Florida State as a program is in shambles. And I'm just looking at Clemson's schedule right now. Syracuse, Charleston, UNC, Florida State, Louisville, BC, Wofford, NC State, Wake Forest, and South Carolina. All of those teams suck.
Yeah.
And, fine, they get to the playoffs and they beat Bama, but still, I think it's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
I think the ACC is a bullshit football conference.
Dude, and to your point on Florida State, Timmy, Florida State should have lost, but that kid from Monroe, Louisiana, missed the extra point. It looked that was just that's Willie Taggart or whatever his name is, man. He's they're pathetic.
Yeah, and
ACC is it's a
yeah, well, you get into the field, and then as Clemson's been able to do, and it's getting into the field that's, I don't think the Big Ten, for instance, Ohio State in particular, hasn't gotten enough credit for navigating the schedule it has to navigate. Now you can't lose to you can't lose to Iowa and Purdue the way that they did, but this year, for instance, if Ohio State's going to qualify for the playoff this year, we've got the middle section of the schedule, starting with the night game at Nebraska, that section there, that gauntlet, and then at the end of the season, you play Penn State at home before you go to Ann Arbor. I mean, Alabama's not doing that. Clemson's not doing that. None of these other teams that are playing for
nobody is doing that, dude. Nobody in the country is doing that.
Yeah, even Oklahoma, they play Texas in early October. They don't play Texas at the end of the year before they would have to go into a conference title game. So you look at what Ohio State's going to have to do just to get to the Big Ten title game. You got to go through Penn State and Michigan in consecutive weeks, and then you're going to play a very good team from the West in the Big Ten title game. So think of those 3 games they're going to have to win just to get considered for the playoff. Yeah, it is. I'm with you, TG. It is frustrating that Alabama and Clemson are manipulating the schedules, and the playoff committee isn't holding them accountable for that. And I don't know. I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, and part of their schedule is three games before the end of the year. They're playing Wofford, who's not even an FBS school.
Right.
I mean, these things have to be rooted out, and it's the Big Ten commissioner talking to the other commissioners kind of saying, look, the ACC is what it is. I just don't think there's enough national discussion about the fact that the ACC is a terrible football conference, and Clemson basically gets handed a playoff spot every year.
Yeah.
But what they could do is not play Wofford.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to make one last comment.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm excited as I've been since 2014 about this Buckeye team. And I was high. I couldn't be any higher on that team. We should have won the national championship that year. But I am as excited as I was in 2014 on both sides of the ball. I think Ryan Day is the man. I think we've got the staff that he put together with Washington, Madison, Hafley, Urick, you've got Wilson, all those guys, man. I just think we've got so much depth, so much talent, and a coaching staff that can take this team to the national championship. And with saying that, I'm just excited. I'm like a little kid, Christmas.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this before the season started. This team has the sophomore and junior class were both part of number 2 overall recruiting classes. And if you look at, I can't remember, it was one of the athletic guys, Ari Wasserman or Bill Landis or both of them. I think they're using the 24/7 composite, 24/7 sports composite. But Ohio State, just from a recruiting perspective, is the most talented team in the country. If you look at the recruiting profiles of everyone on their rosters compared to everyone else in the country, they have a talent edge even over Bama and Clemson with this year's squad. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that cream rise to the crop. We're starting to see, some of these, some of these kids grow into, the star players we thought they would be. So yeah, I'm excited as well. I mean, I've definitely, after these first 2 weeks, I've seen. I didn't have a lot of concerns coming out of the FAU game. Tim, I know you did. Some of the rest of you guys might have had some concerns going into Cincy. I didn't see anything glaring like we did last year in the opener against Oregon State, where they gave up all those long runs. But I certainly feel much better about my prediction for this team, which was playoff after these last 2 weeks. Does anybody have anything else they want to add about just the season in general or observations from yesterday?
My last comment would be that I am particularly excited about Justin Fields because my expectation of what he would be in the first and second game is a run-happy quarterback, somebody who, isn't really looking to throw, is going to take off at the first sign that the first guy's not open, not going to hit a second read or a third read. And I've been impressed with the fact that he actually seems like he wants to sit in the pocket and throw, or he wants to roll out of the pocket and look to throw, and he'll run if he has to. And I think that, to me, has been the biggest surprise so far in what I've seen out of the team, and I think that's exactly what Ohio State needs. We've got great receivers. We're going to have a good offensive line. Just get the ball in playmakers' hands and let them make plays.
Nice. Yeah, I've been bullish on Fields all along, and I even felt like a lot of people were being a little too conservative in the analysis of Fields going into this year. People were very cautious. A lot of the people, especially a lot of the beat writers, they were very cautious in projecting what he might be this year. A little too cautious, in my opinion. I was so excited that when we were able to sign him, but I do agree with you. He's shown a lot more polish as an all-around player and as a pocket passer and a decision maker through these first 2 games than I thought we would see. Paige, you got any closing remarks before we? Yeah, we're at a minute, about a minute 15 right now. So.
Yeah, totally. Timmy's right. Like almost to a fault, right? He's not looking to run. There's a few times you're like, dude, run. That's also part of. He had all day to throw back there. I mean, as good as the offensive line was, opening the polls for Dobbins and Teague, like pass protection was ridiculous.
They were great.
I mean, he literally just, had all the time in the world, and there were a few times where that internal clock wasn't going off for him. He's amazing. I agree. Like I for one wasn't as sure, or like you were clearly on record, Zach. Like, look, man, with coaching and all this stuff, like these guys start to produce much sooner than we're used to. That being said, though, we talked about it last week. He's also really only played his second game, and so he's freaking amazing. And we're in good shape.
Yeah, we're in good shape. Yeah, the offensive line, you mentioned the offensive line, and we've talked about this before. The coaching staff during fall camp seemed to have kind of a quiet confidence about the line this year. If you listen to the press conference, Day's press conference and Stud and some of these other guys, they felt like they had a little something special, and they just wanted to see it, obviously. But there was, like I say, a quiet confidence about that O-line. And the starting 5, I think, is excellent. The left side of that line, we were talking about it earlier, I think is going to be as good as anybody in college football. And they have some depth there, too. They got some guys that they can turn to, Josh Allaby and Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. If they need to, go to one of those guys, I think they'd feel really good about playing either one of them. So, well, all right, boys, we're squarely
all right.
at an hour 15. I think that's a good effort for the first time around. Why don't we wrap it up? And we'll connect next week.
Let's wrap it up with everyone. Everyone give a grade like we did last time.
All right.
What's the grade?
Great. Okay. Hey, CP, let's start with you.
Overall team.
CP, give us your grade. A to F.
I'll go with a solid A on this effort out of the gate yesterday.
PVH.
A+.
All right. TG.
Yep, solid A, 42-0. Hard to pick any faults out of that.
JT, what do you think?
A+ for me, calling the exact score. A for the overall performance and coaching.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. Solid A for me. Great performance, exceeded expectations. I thought it would be a closer game, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was happy to be there as well. It was a gorgeous day. So, all right, fellas. Well, listen, let's wrap it up.
Good to be on with you boys.
Good to be on with you guys, and we'll connect next week after Indiana.